Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. My rally cry is if you are a partner, let all of your various constituents know that this meeting takes place. And if you're a public servant, ditto. And if you're a community member, get your friends and associates who have been affected or are concerned and want to do something about this in here. And it doesn't matter whether it's this committee or PCCEP as a whole, as I've said. The idea is we've just got to build some community critical mass. And so after saying all that mouthful, I'm Celeste Carey, and I am the chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee. And thank you for coming, and pass it on to Claudia.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Claudia Claudio, she, her. I am the project assistant for PCCEP. And so I will go ahead and pass it to Amy Anderson.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Let me see if I can do a video on this thing. Hey, I got a little bit of video. My name is Amy Anderson. I'm the chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm supporting Chair Celeste, so I'm here to support you. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm going to pass it to Barb.
Hello, everyone. My name is Barb Rainish. I'm a community member and PCCEP groupie, she, her pronouns. And I'm going to pass it to Barbara Boshinsky.
Hi, Barbara Boshinsky, she, her, Portland Cop Watch. And I'll pass it to Sarah Ames.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ames, she, her. I'm with the City Attorney's Office and supporting the PCCEP process.
And let's see, who shall we pick next, Sarah? Anybody in particular?
How about Anika?
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Anika Benta Albert, she, her pronouns, with the City Attorney's Office as well. And I'll pass it along to Dr. Silver.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Silver. I'm a psychologist and a current member of the Mental Health Alliance. And I'll pass it to Dan.
Hi, this is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with Portland Cop Watch, and I'm actually attending a second meeting at the same time as this. So I'm going to be kind of jumping around, but I'm mainly focused on this meeting while you're still going. The other one goes till 7:30. So yeah. Lucky me. I think we have one more city attorney that hasn't spoken yet. Is that true? Oh no, I guess she's gone. Like
Okay.
Dashmi was gone now.
Okay, Dan, this meeting may be short if we don't get a lot of community members in, because basically we're going to go over the PowerPoint that we had last month. And I know you've got comments in, and you also know how to reach me easier than most people. So, I hope that won't divide your attention too much.
That's all right. You put your email address in the chat last time. So that's how I got your city email address.
Perfect. Good. That was the whole point. Yes. Okay. So let's see. Did everyone get a chance to see the PowerPoint from last month? Okay. One of the things I asked everybody to do was to give me your questions and concerns. And I really wanted that information from partners and community members alike, because there may be things that you see in terms of explaining the process or helping us formulate questions that we didn't approach. And your insight is really helpful. And then from community members, I'm really excited to get any questions or concerns you have. So I guess I'll just start with inviting community members to share whatever questions they have or concerns to add. And let me see. Let me do a real quick look. I'm not sure if it would be helpful to have the PowerPoint up again, but
Celeste, is it the link that you sent me? Because I have the
yes.
data collection report. Is that the slide you're talking about?
Yes, the
Okay.
the PowerPoint, yes,
Oh.
and it had one
Let's see.
major
I have it.
slide here.
Was the PowerPoint ever distributed?
Yes, I sent it. Oh, wait, that's a different one. I might have
Okay.
sent you the wrong one, Claudia, in
Okay.
which case then whoever asked that question, I might have to say no. I might have messed up and sent the wrong link. Let me get into,
It's okay. If you send it over to me, I can put it up on the screen.
okay, let me go into,
Yeah, Celeste, it was me, Barb, and I thought we had talked about sharing that, and I might have missed it, but I'm not on the PCCEP list, so unless it's actually posted or sent specifically, it's really hard to-
I thought, Barb, that I had sent it to Claudia maybe a week ago.
The link that I have put on the agenda is what I had got. But
Okay, I think I might have sent the wrong one. So right now I'm trying to pull it up here from PowerPoint. And in which case, then I'll just send it as soon as I get it here. Let me open up my Office collection and see where it is. And so this PowerPoint was created by Lauren Brown, and she is the supervisor for the analyst here, Lauren. There it is. Okay. And okay, how do I send this?
maybe you can just forward it to me.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how I saved it. That was the problem. Share. There's got to be a better way to do this. Oh, I have to upload it. It figures. Okay. So in the meantime, if you've got questions here, this PC, yeah, that's what I want. Save.
Yeah, I should have reached out when I realized it was never distributed, at least as far
Well,
as I know.
that's all on me. Nobody else. This is me. Yes, replace the. Why are you giving me grief? Why won't you save? Cancel. Okay.
Would you like to just share it on your screen, Celeste? Would that be
Yeah,
helpful?
that might be quicker. So I'll just share
Okay.
it.
No problem. I'll go ahead and give you the access now.
Okay.
Okay, let me know if you can share screen now.
Okay. And let's see. Okay, and let me get the view. Where is the slideshow? There we go. Move on to slideshow. So, hello. Why am I not getting that? Normal views. There we go. So the only thing that I think might be helpful is there is not a summation. There is not a summation slide on here. So let's just go through it really quickly again. And then we can just go ahead and get your questions then. So let's go ahead and hit it. Okay, so basically what we did here is break down what the sources are and why we are doing this, the definitions. And for those of you who can see it, there's a green text on the top, blue text on the bottom, and it shows why we're collecting it. So there are state of Oregon mandates and criteria that we meet, and that's the overarching reason why we're collecting stops, and then the Portland Police Bureau. And I believe that when we did the presentation, there was someone that also added that there was the mandate from the Department of Justice as well about collecting data, but I don't believe that it specified what types of information to collect. So that type of information is basically from the state. And so then it explained what a stop was, and what the criteria that makes a stop different from like stopping somebody to say hello, or if they were responding to a call. And so, for example, you can't leave, you're restrained. And then this was the criteria for when you can have a stop. And then it also specifies which interactions were not a stop. And so notably, because we hear this a lot, no off-duty interactions are a stop. And that's really important, I think, to talk about. And then routine security checks. And then which stops require data. So again, this is green at the top text for state of Oregon, Portland Police Bureau in blue, so that you know who determines what additional scope there is in the data collection. Let's see, you notice that it also includes pedestrians, cyclists, scooter riders, motorcyclists, etc. And then this is a little bit of the history of why we had it. I'm going to speed through this because this right now is not as germane, it's not as relevant to what we're talking about. And then this is who monitors the collection of the data. So it's monitored and audited by the Portland Police Bureau system. And it is initiated anytime they stop with the computer aided dispatch, which is what CAD is, or to write an e-ticket. And then there's a reminder that's supposed to pop up for the officer to complete this stops mask. And a mask is like a screen. So when they stop somebody, this mask says you must complete this information, and they get a reminder in roughly 8 days. And then there is a state system that just about all of the law enforcement agencies in Oregon use that relies on the officer remembering to fill out this survey. And that was one of the points I brought up to say, is this something we want to address? Do we want to change this process? How do we change this process to make it something that prompts the officer to fill out the information immediately and not be able to clear their dispatches until they fill out that survey? Because if it relies on memory and something traumatic happens, by human, capacity, physiology, they may not remember all the details of that prior stop because they're dealing with trauma. So these were some of the questions I asked. And so it talks about the data that's collected. So at this point, before I go on any further, I want to ask, do you all want to go through this again? Is this helpful in helping you recall your questions, or do you want to go straight to collecting the questions?
I have not seen this before, and it seems very clear.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of would like to go through it if it's all right with other people.
Okay, is that Barbara?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now Barb has a comment.
Okay, let me expand my screen here and stop sharing for just a moment so I can see everybody. Okay, so Barb, you said you had a comment as well.
Yeah, my question is, so the document that you had attached to the agenda, are we not looking at that document tonight?
Apparently not, and I am going to send it. I'm trying to send it while we're talking. That's one reason why I'm not sharing, because I thought I sent this document, the one that you're looking at.
I just am trying to make sure that I'm on the same page as everyone, and since we're not doing the other thing, this is, the more times I hear something, the better I learn it. So I'm all down with either way.
Well, let's see. I want to really be mindful of everybody's time and the best use of time. And I know for my partners, this is old news for you. So for the community members, I know Barbara wants to see it. I think I heard Barb say as well. Is that pretty much how everybody feels? You're okay with seeing this again? I feel bad because I know Dan has seen it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just looking at the slides would probably be, if I could, if I could just look at them on my own, that would work too.
Okay, for
But,
some reason, I don't know,
like-
Barbara, if it's because this was sent to me and I had it in my network. It is not letting me share it. And so I'm going to have to figure out how to be smarter than the tech that I'm using here so that I can actually send it. Because I thought I shared this very thing. Attaches a copy instead.
I had got the report, but once you do send that over to me, I can get it to folks and also post it on the PCCEP website.
Yeah, that's what I think it's going to be after this meeting, because
That's okay.
Tech problem.
That's okay. That's fine. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's totally cool. And what I was gonna say to go along with what Barbara said is my first choice is would be to look at the recording from last month, along with having copies of the slides to follow along and write notes on.
Okay.
That all sounds great to me.
Okay. Rochelle, I haven't heard anything from you. What are your thoughts on this?
Either way is fine with me.
Okay. So given that I think people would like to, there's a file upload button in chat. I'll give that a shot here. Okay, and see if I can make that work. It might be, like I said, it might be the way I received it too, Dan, because it was emailed, but for some reason it went straight to my network drive instead of going to my computer hard drive. But here's my question for my partners. Since you have seen this, you are in attendance, you have the option of leaving, or if there are any questions or thoughts you have that you want us to hear from your various perspective, that would be helpful. So I can take that and along with Claudia, either do some kind of compilation with the questions I have received, or we can just send those questions to everybody else and we can start a shared document. So, Anika and did we lose somebody? Oh, Sarah, there we are. What are your thoughts? Because I don't want to have you seeing something you've already seen before.
I confess I was multitasking, Celeste. I apologize.
That's okay.
The question is whether it's okay to just send the slides around as opposed to going through it again. I mean,
no. This question is for my partners here. Since some of you have seen this already, maybe all of you, I didn't want to have you go through that again. But if when you saw it the first time, if you had thoughts, questions, comments that you think will be helpful for us to look at from a community perspective, did you want to give them to us now? If you have some, you're not obligated. And if you didn't, you were free to go. I was giving you, the letter from the teacher that, yes, the child actually has no school today.
So you were dismissing us.
I was giving you the option. Dismissal these days has such an ominous tone,
Yes, well, thank you very much. I would love to hear if you have any, if you do discuss comments or have any further follow up to that. And I
Okay.
could, it doesn't hurt. Like Barb, I do sometimes learn something new if I hear the same thing over. So I will just kind of stay tuned and probably, I admit, work on a little email in the meantime too. So
Okay.
thank you.
Well, what we'll do is Dan has a good question and a good point. And I think this will help you when you all who have not seen it watch this again. Dan, if you would go ahead, yes, and post your email. I do have it as a document. I just copied it and wrote it down here as a document that I can share. But I feel better if you do it because it's your work. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Okay, cool. And so what I can do is take your document and share, and then you can discuss your point. So let me share screen and pull up your document. I believe this is the one. Let's see. Yes, there it is. Okay, so have at it. Dan, you have the floor.
Oh, okay. Well, I raised a bunch of points last meeting during the slideshow presentation, and I sent the chair here my follow-up comments, which expanded on those a little bit. And we at Portland Cop Watch, we've been following this subject of stop data since 2000, when the first time they put out data, and they're always, disproportionately African American or Black people are stopped more than other people in the city. And we know that there's only a 6% Black population here, but it's 18 to 24% of the time that people are pulled over in their cars, they're Black. There's one other thing that I brought up at the very end. I'm going to paste in here. Okay, so reviewing the points that I made in the email. The Portland Police Bureau uses a benchmark of traffic crashes rather than census data to determine about how many drivers are of what race. Generally, that crash rate for African American Portlanders has been between 9 and 11%, still lower than how often PPB pulls over Black drivers. Although in 2020, there was a much closer correlation. There was about 17% crashes and 17% of traffic stops for Black people. But last year was a very strange year where a lot of the police were on special duty covering protests every night, and I don't think they were doing as many stops. So I don't think that's telling. If really, if we're going to look at these patterns, you sort of have to carve out 2020 as a special thing. So that's one thing that the police use that as a benchmark. How many people crash their cars, and to some extent, we haven't argued with that point because it makes sense. You want to know how many people are actually driving, but it's usually still, most years, it's about half as many as get stopped by the police. So that's the first point. Want me to keep going, or you want for
Well,
feedback?
does anybody have any questions? Let me check the chat real quick. I have a question, Dan. Now, can you explain why Portland Police Bureau does this particular process, why they use crashes rather than census data? I mean, if it's more efficient, why is it more efficient?
I'm not saying efficient. I'm just saying that it's more. I think it's more accurate as to who it will be in a car, more likely to be in a car when you see, because it's not like there's no bias in how cars crash into each other or into something on the side of the road, right? That happens, presumably, equally among all races. So I think that's where their point is, that if we're going to say that the police are doing, exhibiting bias by pulling people over, let's really think about how many people are driving on the street. So I think that's why they do it. They introduced this data point, and another one I'm going to discuss in a little bit, a couple of years ago, because people kept saying to them, why are you pulling over so many Black people? And they were trying to respond to that question. So they tried to think of ways to explain what was going on. So that's one of them, their explanations. And like I said, I think this one, of the three that I'm going to be discussing, this one makes the most sense because it does show how many people are driving.
Okay, so when I said more efficient, that was an example. I mean, you kind of explained why they're using it, and so that helped a lot. So this would be one of the things we would note, and we would ask, are there better indicators, for example, are there any other jurisdictions that have found other indicators that are a better predictor of how many people of what races are driving? And that's something we could ask the police. You can go to your next point now, please.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, I was moving my phone around. I forgot that I had the mute button off. So the Bureau also started using, when they started using this traffic crash data point, they also said that one of the reasons that people get pulled over more is because they're victims of crime. So they were trying to show the gang enforcement team, which then became the gun violence reduction team, and now there's going to be the focus intervention team. But they all have had traffic stops that are between 50 and 80% of their stops were Black people, which is way more than 6% or 9% or 11%. Mm-hmm. So to explain that strange anomaly, they said, oh, well, you have to look to where people are being victimized by crime. And to me, that makes no sense at all. Like, it doesn't make sense that you're more likely to commit a traffic infraction or be pulled over by the police because you're also more likely to be the victim of crime. So I find that very disturbing, and I don't know what other people think about it, but that's one of the data points we've been trying to convince them to pull out of their reports because we don't think it's relevant.
Okay, I kind of agree. This is something that's been discussed before in the public, and it makes no sense because basically I see this as it trying to claim that a person is simultaneous, both a victim and a perpetrator. And that justifies that particular data point. But I think that as a committee, if you feel that we should bring this forward as a recommendation, I would ask you to feel free to do so and just put in the language that basically indicates what you want. We can look at it as a committee and we can move this forward as a recommendation to the steering committee and then to the full board. So these are the kind of things that I want to look at. Okay, thank you. I'm making a note of that one, and if you're through, we can go to your next point.
Just in terms of procedure, I'm presenting this to you. You and Ms. Anderson are the two PCCEP members who are part of the committee. We'd be thrilled if you take that, turn it into your own language, and present it in, because I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if it's something you agree with, you want to write something, that would be great. Again, this is Portland Cop Watch have been bringing this over several chiefs of police because they keep changing every year, and then nothing ever happens about getting that data point pulled out. All right, so the next one is that the PPB says another reason their stops of Black drivers is so high is that people driving from Gresham and other surrounding areas increase in the African American population of Portland from 6% on any given day. And we know there's been diaspora because there's been gentrification and people have been pushed out into the bus suburbs and exurbs, and they've been driving into Portland. So there's some truth to that people have to work here, can't afford to live here anymore. But if it's true, what we wrote is that they should review stops that result in warnings, citations, or arrests to see how many people are not from Portland, and then also add the person's city of residence to that data screen, the mask you were talking about, because then they can prove their point. But they haven't done. We've been asking this, ever since they started claiming that. And this is a little more recent claim. This, I think the other ones are 4 or 5 years old, and this one's like the last 2 or 3 years. But if that's true, if it's because there's commuters, then why don't you prove it? I would like to see evidence.
Okay, I'm trying to write my notes for that because that is another good point that we can bring forward. Okay, thank you, Dan. And your next point?
At some point I thought, and there's so much information in my brain, I can't always locate where it came from. But at some point I thought, and you were talking about how they have 8 days to fill in this, the mask after the traffic stop. But the most important time to fill it out is between the time they pull the person over and the time they actually walk up to the car and see who's driving, because that point they can say what their perception was of who was driving the car. And then they can fill out a second screen later that says, oh, well, this is what it turned out to be. Either my perception was right or it was wrong. Then that will also help indicate bias, because then you know what was going on in the officer's head at the time they made the stop. So I don't know if, I think that the screen only has one entry point now, and if you're saying it can be done up to 8 days in the future, that's not really helpful for what was the officer thinking when they did the stop, right? So
Yeah.
if they have that ability to split it into two parts, that would be something I think you should recommend as well.
I think I will be consulting you to make sure that I get these in true to the spirit that you mean them. And so thank you for ahead of time for working with me on this, so that we can get this worded appropriately, so it responds to the spirit of your concern. Now, for our partners here, do you have any insight on any additional insight on how we might view these points that Dan has made so far? Because the last three are things that I see this committee moving forward on, but I do want your input, if you have some. And of course, anybody else.
Yes, Celeste, I have a question for you. Listening to you guys talk about all this, it kind of makes me wonder if what we're not asking for is better transparency in how people actually do things. And so I'm kind of wanting to really move the transparency subject matter across the continuum, because unless we know where we can change the infrastructure, it's kind of like we keep ending up in circles, talking about stuff we need fixed, but we don't know if it can be or where it can be fixed. Does that make sense?
Yes, and to that point, in the PowerPoint that I have from Lauren Brown, she does address how some of these are dictated by the state. So we would have to go level up higher than the police. And as we're getting these questions clarified and getting our language together, one of the things I want to do is invite some of our state electeds to come and talk to us about that process.
Good.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to have a meeting like that. Let's see, this is December. I'm hoping to have a meeting like that in February. But what I'm trying to do, and I see the need for it, is getting more community people in to talk about it. The questions and the ideas that everybody are bringing up are good now, but the embarrassment is that it's just us. And I think that these are good points. I trust that Dan has talked to a lot of people. The history of Cop Watch, we have other members of PCCEP that are familiar with his work. We have other community people and partners that are familiar with his work. I know there are other people that's bringing this forward, but I feel a little vulnerable because we don't have enough community folks there. But the plan still is to try to get it in February. I'm trying to get it before they go back into session, so we'll see how it works. And right now, it would be approaching Casey Jama and Lou Fredericks. But if you know somebody else that is appropriate, please, by all means, tell me. Even if you don't have a relationship with that person, Claudia, Theo, Judith, myself, we can figure out how to approach them and appeal to them to get them to come and speak to us. And then let's see. Okay. No more in the chat. Okay, Dan, so if you would you continue, please? And thank you.
Okay, well, I've got two more things that are in the email, and there's one more I want to mention because of something when you were talking about the state law. So let's. I'm surprised I didn't put it into the email to you in the first place. Anyway, so one of the reasons that the Police Bureau is still collecting stop data is that one of the only mentions of race in the settlement agreement is in paragraph 148, which requires the Bureau to keep collecting demographic data on stops. Now, the previous oversight body that was attached to the DOJ agreement was the Community Oversight Advisory Board, COAB, and before that, the Human Rights Commission's Community Police Relations Committee, or CPRC, were supposed to help the Bureau determine what data points were going to be on that screen, on that mask you've been talking about. And the police never really reached out to either group to ask for that input. And the agreement was written in 2012 and said that input happened by the end of 2013, which is 8 years ago now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've changed the screen at least twice more. And we at CopWatch are always learning about it when it comes up in the compliance officer and community liaisons report after the fact. And they say, okay, they've changed the data screen. Here it is. And it's never, hey, community, we're going to do this. What do you think? So I find that, so I think you should make sure that when they're making those changes, they ask for community input before they make them. But on that note, the compliance officer, community liaison, has been mentioning, and they've been very reluctant to talk about race until the George Floyd murder, and then they started referring to that as the George Floyd murder and talking about the hope that they saw from people protesting in the streets, that there'll be racial justice. And so there's been a little change in tone from the compliance officer in the last year and a half. So they've been noting that the traffic stop data are disproportionate, but they've been encouraging the community to do work on it because it's not one of the main focuses of the agreement. They don't feel comfortable weighing in on this stuff, which is, I think, unfortunate. But so they're putting it back on us to talk to the Bureau about it. But that's what you're working on now. But one of the main points I made in this paragraph is that the slide deck from the Bureau said, here's all the reasons we're collecting the stop data, but they don't mention the settlement agreement, paragraph 148.
Yes.
They're going to be talking to the community about why they're doing it. They should say, oh yeah, we're also doing this to comply with the agreement.
I believe you brought that up when we did the slide presentation as well.
Yeah, no, I did. So I'm trying not to add too much to my commentary on what I wrote to you. And like I said, there's one more thing I want to get to. So tell me when you're ready for the last paragraph, and then I also want to give that one more point if I can.
Yes, go ahead. I'm ready.
Okay, so the next one is we're encouraging the Racial Equity Subcommittee to review use of force and deadly force data as well, because they also show disproportionate policing against the Black community. People who are subjected to force are 25 to 30% of the people subjected to force are Black or African American in a city that's 6% Black. And the people who are subjected to deadly force is somewhere between 20 and 25%. I'm trying to phrase this in a way that doesn't sound like, because we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about human beings who are being shot and shot at. But because these have shot 8 people this year, and as far as we know, none of them are Black, that percentage has probably gone down. But still, it's troubling they shot 8 people this year, regardless of their race. But just so you know, so that number, I don't know exactly what the number is. You have to go back and crunch numbers based on what we know about the people who were shot. But the Training Advisory Council looked at force data, and they found issues with who's being subjected to force. Like, in particular, like the pointing of firearms was more disproportionate against Black people, and I think there was one other field that they found that in. And I'm also surprised I didn't mention this here. The Training Advisory Council, which is another advisory group, but they're actually advisory to the Portland Police. They're also written into settlement agreement, and they asked for those quarterly force data to include demographic data. So it says, okay, 26% of the people subjected to force this quarter are Black, and 6% of the population is Black. But the Bureau absolutely refused to do that. they said they would put in a link so that people could find out what the census data are. They said that census data aren't reliable, and they gave all sorts of reasons. And one of the members of the Training Advisory Council quit because of that. I'm talking about within the last 2-3 years. So this is not like old history before they knew that they were supposed to be working on equity. And in fact, one of the refusals came from Chief Outlaw.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, I see there's one more point from the email before I get to this other point that I wanted to get to. So the late June this year, the chief said that he suggests, it's a guideline, it's not written in the policy, that officers shouldn't pull people over, drivers over for minor infractions. Right, that, like if your tail light is out, or if you fail to signal turn, things like that, equipment violations, and minor things, they're not going to pull people over. It's only when there's something major that's actually going to cause problems, like if they go through a stop sign, things like that. The equipment violations data were in the annual reports about stops for a long time. They disappeared for a while, and they came back again in last year's annual report. And they made up 11% of non-traffic stops, meaning that one of every 9 stops was for a broken taillight or similar issue in 2020. So it'd be nice to see the new data from this year and make a comparison and see if at least these last 6 months have made a difference.
That's actually something that Marlon, Marion, and I discussed, and I'm not sure if we brought that up to Assistant Chief Leisure or not, but that is one of the points we wanted the committee to look at and maybe bring forward to ask the police. So some of these extra points that you had a couple of things that you didn't expand upon in your email. If you could send those to me at my email address at portlandoregon.gov, that would help a lot as we flesh this out, and we can start with this particular wave, if y'all will, of recommendations. There's going to be more than this wave, because as we review the data, one of the things that Jared had mentioned, Jared Hager, that had said that we need to look at this data, even though it's old data, with new eyes, because there are different questions that can come up, just like the way Dan is looking at some of this older material and seeing how either it's being echoed in today's actions and issues, or it needs to be reviewed through the light of how things are being done today. So I'm hoping, like I said, Dan, you and I can get together and fine tune this. And then this is another thing, like I said, that Marlon and I have been talking about bringing forward. And I have to apologize for Marlon not being able to be here. Some of you may not know, he's alternating between East and West Coast. And he also has another meeting that's exactly at this time. And so I've lost the benefit of him being able to help me kind of co-facilitate this meeting. But I'm trying to hold forth until we figure out a way to make it work. But to get back on point, Dan, was there an additional issue you wanted to raise? Because I thought I heard you say there was one more that you didn't put in the email.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's because the slideshow you had was primarily focused on traffic stops, but the data that the police put out also includes pedestrian stops.
Yes.
And for some reason, in the last 2 to 3 years, the number of pedestrian stops has plummeted from several thousand a year to a couple hundred a year at most. And in fact, the last quarter they put out data for, which I think was Q2 of this year, it showed there were only 10 people stopped by the police when they were pedestrians. And that includes, I believe, bicyclists as well.
Yes, it does.
In 3 months' time. And I find that incredibly hard to believe. So I think what they're doing with those, so in the slides that you showed us again today, they said the state with traffic stops requires them only to do a traffic stop if it's a self-initiated stop, like the police officer was stopping the car because they saw something and they decided to stop. But the Portland police require their officers to track it if it's self-initiated or if it's for a call.
Exactly.
So, but I believe that the state law about pedestrian stops is the same thing. It's kind of very specific about, well, if you had suspicion of a crime and blah, blah, blah. So I think the Portland police have just stopped tracking those. And I would like.
Can I chime in with you guys?
Yes, go right ahead.
Because what you guys maybe may not be seeing is that because I work on the streets with the houseless population and those most marginalized, the rule of thumb has been since COVID that most of the officers that are called in for serious situations like on my clients, they have been told to walk away. They have been told to leave the client alone. They have been told not to engage the client if they suspect there's any kind of mental health involved. They want him involved with like the behavioral health unit. They really surprisingly have had a completely hands off these situations for the last 2 years. Because I've called them out to try to help with clients who are really in a bad way. And they're like, no, we can't get involved. We're not engaging in this situation. So there's been a lot of hands off of a lot of people who typically they would have stopped. And what else I'm seeing is a lot of the work, which a lot of folks don't think about, is a lot of these folks are on parole and probation, which never comes up. The subject doesn't come up, okay? The number of people that they've stopped that are on parole and probation or have outstanding warrants or whatever the heck it is, that information is not documented. So we have no idea how many of these folks were actually like a PO violation or a parole violation. There's so many variables in this now that I'm seeing as to why people are stopped, as to why people, are like kind of put in certain situations. There's a lot, because we all know that the majority of the Black population has been in prison. At least I know that, okay, in Portland. They've been incarcerated. So the incarcerated individuals are going to be known by the police just by their face.
Yeah.
And so my concern is I think a lot of folks got so well known by police that they just see them and they would stop them because they wanted to know what they were up to. And I ran into that when I was doing the jail ministry. A lot of the inmates I worked with, I asked them, how is it you keep getting arrested? I said, do the police know you by name? And all of them said yes. So the problem is they're well known for what they do. They were very in everybody's face. So there's a lot of mixed things going on that I don't think these reports spell out, that I would like more answers to, is like, how many of these folks you stopped or arrested were parole violations or probation violations or failure to appear? That's the biggest ticket item right now, is people aren't going to court. So I really would like another view at this from the criminality perspective. Like, how many of these folks are already in the criminal justice system? You know what I mean? It'll change the numbers if you look at the history. That's just my take on it now, is like, I see the circle. It's not including folks that are already marginalized in the criminal justice system. Or is it? Is that information in there and I'm just not seeing it?
I didn't see anything to that effect. And so it sounds like what we want initially is to hear more about the specific pedestrian stops data, right? And then to start looking at points of intersectionality, between people who are folks of color, especially Black, and are pedestrians, and have, what do you call it? I don't know what the exact phrase, but multiple reasons for being stopped and multiple points of that would create, I guess, a legitimate reason for being stopped. Like if you're a parolee and you're on violation, and
Yes.
that, and you have a warrant. If you have a mental health stop, maybe if you've had a domestic violence stop or something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
If you don't have walls or car doors and car windows around you,
Yes.
when you are homeless, you are exposed.
Exposed and vulnerable.
Completely different about even being able to see a cop and walking into your own building and disappearing up a stairwell. It's a lot harder to do that outside. Sorry. To piggyback, what are you calling me now? To piggyback on what
Yes, go right ahead, Barb.
just about to say, what Amy was just saying, that I'm with what we were just talking about with the pedestrian stops.
Mm-hmm.
I also wonder if Measure 110 going into effect correlates with any of that, and how many of those little deferment cards the Portland PB has even handed out. But that was one of my first thoughts as far as what's changed as of 6 months ago or so. The other thing with that,
your sound just dropped out. Barb. Okay.
in my opinion,
There you go.
misused and misquoted statistic from a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that half of the people that have been arrested are people that live outside.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because those people are exposed and they have warrants. And those things just go hand in hand. It's not a real measurement of like the amount of crime that's being committed by homeless people. And it really, really bugs me that statistic was being misused when it came out. But now I wonder if we can reutilize it and see if that's changed with COVID and with contacts with cops. That's one set of thoughts. The three thoughts before we started talking about the pedestrian stops are, number one, I don't know who here has worked on stuff with the state legislature, and I don't know if you were talking about getting educated on what's going on currently, or trying to get something going, because February is kind of late to be getting stuff going toward the state legislature, because usually the stuff is ready to be like dropped to legal, to be approved, to go on to move forward.
I wasn't thinking in terms of getting anything ready to present to them to move forward, as I was thinking more about them coming to us and talking about if this is a state mandate category of data collection points and only the state can change it, for them to speak to us about what we would need to do to change it, because they're our point of contact. So it's something that probably would not come out of this cycle, but it would maybe come out of a next session.
2 years, because then you've got the short session.
Well, that, maybe that's part of the education that we will be offering the public.
No, I just, it's just in terms of timing and stuff, like,
Yeah.
it's not necessary, it's a hurry up and get it to go at the beginning of the session if it's not something you want to have going on for the session, right?
Mhm.
So, sorry, I've been working on learning how some of those things work. I wasn't sure if from when you were talking about, well, never mind, I'm gonna wait. That's a process thing. The 8-day thing,
Mm-hmm.
so that struck me as odd, and then Mr. Handelman called it out again.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying that if an officer doesn't fill out their stop data reporting, then a week later, they get a prompt to do it, which means, what does it mean if they don't do it?
Well, that's one of the things that I want to bring forward. Yes.
Okay.
I want to bring that one forward. I'm concerned because some people might think 8 days is an acceptable amount of time for them to be able to complete it. My concern is that, like I said, as an example, if they have what seems to be an unremarkable or non-remarkable stop, but maybe there's one or two issues that's, kind of trying to form in the officer's mind. He's trying to grasp some perception that seems out of place. And then he goes to a stop where he may be dealing with a traumatic situation. He's not going to recall that prior stop as well, because he will either be witnessing somebody else's trauma, or he himself or
Right.
she may be subject to trauma. So I think we need to figure out why they have 8 days and to figure what we can do to make that happen faster.
I agree. And I was basically going to add to your point,
Uh-huh.
that if there's like no real harsh punishment for not getting things done on
Consequences, yeah.
why is somebody going to drag their heels and say, okay, on Friday, I'll do everything from the whole week? And then what if they're out with COVID? Then it never gets done. I don't understand how some of that stuff works. So I just agree with you on that. So that's it.
Okay. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to add? Okay, so Dan, thank you for allowing us to kind of go down a parallel road. I won't call it a cul-de-sac. Were you able to finish your points?
Yeah, I was. I just, something that Amy Anderson said that I wanted to respond to or add to, which is that we, our name is Portland Cop Watch, and we, pre-COVID at least, did a lot of cop watching downtown in Old Town Chinatown and ran into a lot of houseless people. And a lot of them would tell us the police would just stop them and ask them for their ID, and then they'd run it to see if they had a warrant on them. And that's not reasonable suspicion. That's just like, it's either what Ms. Anderson was talking about, where they recognized them and suspected that they were on parole, or it's just a form of harassment. And I know that there's people, particularly people in the Black community, but people who've gotten out of prison, and then the police never let them live their life. Like they, even though they did their time and supposedly are able to turn their life around, the police keep coming after them. And the Michael Fesser incident in West Lynn is a prime example of that, because the stuff that the former Portland officer was relying on to suggest that Fesser was involved in gangs happened like 20 and 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think that's an important point to see if the outcome was an arrest due to a warrant. That may be in the data too. I'll check the annual report and see if they say whether the arrest was based on something the police officer witnessed or whether it was based on a warrant or something. And I'll try to put that in the chat when I find it.
Thank
Okay.
you, Dan.
I do believe that there is a brief mention of that in this PowerPoint. So you may be able to get some additional information from it.
Hey, Celeste, I noticed that Sarah made a comment about what I said about not a lot of Blacks are arrested, or not the majority of them. I would like to hear more.
Okay. So this will be a good time.
Sarah, can
Sarah?
you explain?
Hi, Amy. Yes, I was just curious because I thought I heard you say that most Black people in Portland have been incarcerated.
Well,
And
those are the numbers that have been, come across all of the committees I've ever worked on, talking about the disproportionate number of African Americans that are arrested and booked in jail. I mean, the MacArthur reports, everything I've ever seen has indicated that that is a problem here. And so that's what I'm going by.
So maybe this is a matter of how the words are arranged, because it sounds
Yes.
like to me, you're saying that there's a disproportionate amount, but if I'm hearing Amy correct, you're saying, I mean, Sarah correct, you're saying that most Black Portlanders have not been arrested. And I think those are two different points.
Yes. Okay. Help me purge this out a little more, because I don't know how to say it. But I
Okay.
know there's a huge disproportionate of African Americans incarcerated in our jails. I already know that for a
Yeah,
fact.
there is a disproportionate amount, but I don't think it's accurate to say that most Black Portlanders have been arrested. It's just that comparatively speaking, it's a high percentage, but not most.
Well, if the percentage is only 6%,
Yeah,
and
but
the
some of these are
percentage,
rearrest. You want to think there's rearrest, and if
oh, right.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. This is what I'm trying to work out, language wise, so I can explain what I hear correctly. Because I definitely have a lot of African Americans in my program that are spending the majority of their lives in either the state hospital or prison. So from my viewpoint, I have a lot of folks who are disproportionately incarcerated.
Right.
I'm just going to say that then, okay?
Okay, hold on for a minute, Barb. And so does that speak to your point, Sarah?
yes, thank you. I just wanted to correct, because I mean, there is a trope, frankly, a racist characterization of most African American people as engaged in criminal behavior. And I accept that Amy really was trying to make a very different comment, but it came out in a way that I just was like, I wanted her to have the opportunity to correct the record, and I'm very glad that she took that opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah, because my language is a little complicated from what I see and what is. So I tend sometimes to have to work it through others. I have dyslexia and some cognitive learning disabilities, so my language doesn't always come out the way it's in my head.
Well, I can appreciate, and thank you so much, Sarah, for clarifying that, because when I heard her say it, I defaulted to what I thought she meant instead of clarifying it. So you're keeping me honest too, Sarah, so I appreciate that. A good way of looking at this when you're trying to figure out how to articulate it, Amy, is you would hear this expression in the 80s and early 90s, that there were more Black males in prison than there were in college. And that became, that was a trope for a while, for a decade and a half. And it was an unfortunate statement, which was racist without maybe the person who's saying it knowing. Now, I don't know who said it originally. I just know that it became a truism. People would say that like it was true without anybody actually doing any research, until some people did some research to clarify things. And so, I guess because the number is disproportionate, there is some confusion of how you want to articulate that. But, you want to remember, some people are being rearrested, and then sometimes arrests go through families, and then those families might be affected again. And so that's one way that it can cause a disproportionate amount without it having to be all of the set. But that's a good point, and thank you everyone for us clearing it up. Now it is 6:38, and let's see. I want to make sure that we've gotten everything from Dan that he wanted to share from his email. We can communicate by email. I'm going to figure out how to get this out of the network and get it sent to Claudia so that you can have it for next week. I might be able to get it done tonight or tomorrow, but definitely it'd be next week. And then if you are all right with that, Dan, I can forward the copy I used on the screen share of your email, where it's just your text and none of your personal information, and a few other questions, and we can start looking at some next steps. And then for next steps, what are some things you want to look at for our January meeting? We can take the next few minutes to talk about it, or we can kind of have the floor open for a few more questions for tonight. What would work for people tonight?
So when you said next week, did you mean next month in terms of
I'm
getting
sorry. I'm sorry. I did mean next month.
Okay. I noticed that Dr. Rosenbaum was on. That's the compliance officer I was talking about earlier, who has mentioned that the community needs to talk about the disproportionality of the traffic stop. So I don't know if he wants to say anything. But I also, more generally, I think one of the reasons more people may not be here, like when we send out the information about meetings to the people on the Portland Cop Watch list, and I also send out emails to the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, because I'm on the steering committee there. And I think one of the reasons people aren't necessarily picking up to come to these meetings is that they don't get their own individual attention, because I know the staff is working really hard, and it's really complicated keeping up with so many different meetings a month. But if you want to have a big turnout at one of these meetings, it would be great to have just an email that says, come to the Racial Equity Subcommittee meeting this month, because we're talking about traffic stops and we need input from the community. And then I can forward that as a separate thing then, instead of here's the 5 subcommittees that are meeting this month, because I think it just gets overwhelming to people who don't know which one to go to.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you so much. Kind of more of a targeted ask. And then with these committees, do you think it would be helpful, at least for the 2 that you sit on, for maybe me to come and make a pitch?
Oh, you mean you're asking to come to a Cop Watch meeting or to an AMA coalition meeting?
Yes, I am.
I don't think that's necessarily going to be very helpful or appropriate.
Okay.
I can check in with Dr. Haynes about the coalition.
Well, I would like to just promote it any way that they find appropriate. I don't have to make a personal, appearance or a virtual appearance. I just wanted to show my face as a gesture of sincerity and real welcome. That's all. So
I think that's. Yeah. I'm planning to call Dr. Haynes tomorrow, so I'll touch base with him and ask him that along with my other questions for him.
Okay, that would be perfect. That would be perfect. And then let's see, there was someone else you wanted me to speak to, Dan? Was it Dennis? Did you have points to add or? Okay.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I had other meetings, but yeah, I was not here when you discussed, but there are still disparities in traffic stops that are worthy of attention. So, and there are things that can be done about that, I believe. So, part of it, and I think PPB is starting to move in that direction, which is to only make stops where there's a serious public safety or health issue, and not, the more minor things that happen with the tail light out and that sort of thing. But also when people are stopped, the searches that occur that are disproportionate as well, and disparities, they should also be, the PPB has been working on this with community groups, that there's to distribute a card that allows people to know their constitutional right to voluntarily be searched or not, as opposed to, and so with 5 different languages that are the most prominent languages in Portland, I think that will be helpful as that gets implemented, but it's taken forever. So because it just takes time to get these things done.
So it sounds like if I was going to put, I see you, Barbara, give me just a second here. It sounds like if I was going to pull something like an action item out of that, it would be how can PCCEP support or facilitate moving faster on having these either these cards distributed or informing the public of their rights when stopped. So am I getting close to what you're talking about, Dennis?
No, I think that's very reasonable to inquire about that. The community groups that they have some advisory groups that have helped them interpret those those consent cards into these languages, and the original interpretations were problematic, and so they've had to go back. But it's been over a year, so or it's about a year. So I think it's certainly wouldn't object to seeing people put some inquiry and some pressure on about that. And then, I don't know what exactly PPP's done to change the way they do traffic stop enforcement, but that's certainly something to be further explored. I'm sure they could address that better than I could.
Thank you. I've got that in my notes as well. And then Barbara, I saw your hand. And then Barb after her.
Thank you. So I agree with Mr. Rosenbaum that know your rights is really important. And Copwatch actually used to do some, but when I worked in California with a group, we got some feedback, and this is just informal, that the Know Your Rights training was very helpful to young white people, but it didn't really help the Latinx people and other people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And from reading some of the accounts from, in the Black Lives Matter, they sort of tell people's story if they got stopped or killed, especially, or abused by the police. And it seems like some of the trouble was some of them did know their rights and were insisting on them.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how would that be navigated? That's just a question. I don't have the answer, but I remember apparently some of the Latinx people, they didn't speak English very well. So they take the little Know Your Rights card. It was translated English and Spanish. And so they'd read it in Spanish, and then they'd go to the same number in English and point to the police, and it would make them mad, I guess. They didn't like that. So it's just like, and I don't know what all that's about, but anyway.
Well, as a person of color, woman of color who was young and who sometimes ran afoul because I asserted my rights and I was able to articulate them, I will say, yes, that does get you in trouble. You're perceived as minimally being uppity, or mouthy. And, at the most, you're perceived as being resistant to the questioning process, which can lead to you being arrested and then being cited for resisting arrest. So I can see how the training is more effective for young white kids and people, because society affords them more of an opportunity to assert themselves. And so that is a major issue right there, because if a person is just trying to explain himself and that causes them to be further pushed into that whole arrest pipeline, what can we as a committee do to offset that? And that's a question. We don't have to answer that now, but that's just that's something for us to work to. That's something for us to look to bring forth to the public so that we can have that discussion. But thank you for bringing that up, Barbara. That's important.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening.
And then Rochelle, I see a hand from you. Oh no, I'm sorry. That was my cursor. Barb, you did have your hand up. Yes.
I did, because I just wanted to, well, I was going to make the comment that the steering committee can make sure that there's an ask of the police department of where they're at to bring that up at the next big meeting. But now after Barbara's comments, I don't want to come off for or against anything. It was just a suggestion if, as a way to follow up, if anybody wanted to. I guess I will just leave that part there.
I think this is something that the Racial Equity Subcommittee could bring up. And I think it would have the proper tone, you know, so we don't have to abandon it.
Right. So I guess, so my suggestion procedurally would be, if you wanted to, would be to reach out and let whoever you want to hear from, I would imagine it would be the police department, right? To have that included in the next report when the, you know, in the next, at the next PCCEP meeting, when they do their part and bring their updates. Those are the words I'm trying to get out of my mouth. And then my other question was, is there going to be continuity to when this meeting meets yet? And has it been picked?
I'm
I heard you say something about Marlon not being able to make it, and I know he would be a huge asset to have around.
Yeah, he's my hope for one of the co-facilitators. Two things are going on. I think I asked to have this meeting moved because I have a finance committee meeting at this time, but I'm leaving that job at the end of the year, so I will be free. And that will also give me a little flexibility, and I'll work with Marlon to find out if there's a better time for him. And then we'll be able to fix it so that we have continuity, and that also I can get my notices out in enough time and not keep moving the meeting forward, you know, in the month. So yes.
5:30 to 7 is
5:30. Okay, let's see. The latest meeting we have, I think we might be the latest meeting, or, you know, because generally we start around 5 or so. So is 5:30 too late? Is that the problem?
I'm asking for confirmation only because, to be frank, at the last steering committee meeting, somebody made a comment that, oh, they're all from 6 to 7:30 now, and except the subcommittee meetings, right? And this one wasn't. So I wasn't sure if it was because December's, you know, a one-off or what. And
no, actually, I think I have to check with Claudia, but I think we've been meeting at 5:30 for a while now. But
yeah, the subcommittee's been meeting for a while.
At 5:30, yeah.
Yeah.
So unless there's some consensus that a later time would work, you know, I can keep it at 5:30 to 7. The main reason I would change it is to accommodate Marlon. And so I'll make sure I get as much information so I can bring that forward, and I will either communicate by email with everybody or we'll discuss it at the next meeting.
okay, put me on your list.
Okay, and I go through Amy anytime I email anything, but yes.
That doesn't count.
Yeah. I don't mean Amy, I'm sorry. I meant to say Claudia. I'm trying to multitask and write down what you said to bring forward to Marlon here.
No problem.
See, one of the ways my dyslexia manifests is like it makes me slide past things when I try to have two thoughts in my head and do two other things. Okay, it is 6:53. So I have a number of items that I can propose for our agenda. One is the time of our meeting so that we can work with Marlon. Another one is to discuss what we want to do with Know Your Rights. And of course, I'm going to send forth the PowerPoint and Dan's note. And then if anybody has notes, please send them to me and Claudia. And then as I kind of decipher my notes here, I will send out an email to everybody who's attended with Claudia's help. and see if this agenda that I'm proposing will work. Because I do want to get some consensus. I want to make sure I bring up points that are relevant and keep us on track. But always feel free if you think that there's something I'm missing or that I have actually dropped the ball on something, to let me know. You've got my email. I'll put it in the chat again. And I always welcome comments, questions, thoughts. Feel free to contact me, ways to improve, whatever. Anything that I can do to make my service better to this committee and or subcommittee, and then the committee at large. Oregon.gov, and then my phone number. Let me include that. And my phone number is just for you all, unless you see me giving it out. But always ask me, or you can always refer somebody to me. But I'd rather keep my
I'll point out, if you say it onto the recording, it'll be posted on the video.
Thank you for reminding me. In that case, see Claudia, please. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. But the email is for public. That's for the public, so they can reach me. So if
Sorry, I just have one more or two quick comments. If
yes, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay, well, what Barbara said about generally about our Know Your Rights trainings is true. That there's a certain privilege that white people have in our society, where pushing back against the police doesn't get them as much trouble as folks of color and other vulnerable populations. But the reason the cops are doing this is because not everybody knows their rights, and because they've been over searching the Black population for many years. That it used to be that 80% as much contraband was found on Black people, and now it's 90% because the police are getting a little bit better at searching everybody equally. But a lot of it is because the police say, "Can I search you?" And people are like, "Oh my God, there's a cop saying, can I do this?" And they say, "Just say yes," even though they have a right to say no, and they don't know they have the right to say no. So it's actually, I think it's a good thing, a good step forward for the police to have something to explain that they have the right to say no. It's interesting they've dragged their heels for a year to get that in place. And then the other thing is that, we're talking about Marlon Marion a lot, and he's the equity director for the Bureau, but the people who put these data together is the Strategic Services Division. And I don't know if you can reach out and get somebody from there, because maybe that's even where you got the slideshow from.
Yeah, Lauren Brown.
Yeah, they're the ones who are compiling these data, and they might have some more insight into some of the questions that we have. Thank you.
One of the reasons that I'm working with Marlon is, as you know, and I know, we kind of have a little distance between us on our opinions about having the police in a certain role, but he's one of the people who is helping me co-facilitate this in terms of creating access for me to police and helping me actually formulate questions that deal with equity, both internally with the police and externally with the way the police interact with the community. But then, I do want to try to reach out to all of the different groups within the police department. And Lauren Brown has graciously offered to come and speak to us, but I wanted to make sure I had that basic training first, so that we know what kind of questions to ask her, so we could ask those core concerns. We could ask the real questions and have enough information so that we were asking informed questions. So I will reach out to other folks, and Dan and Barbara, if there are other members of Portland Police Bureau that you think I should talk to, please just let me know. Just let me know, and we can make that happen. It is 6:58, and I want to thank you all. I hope this was a helpful and informative meeting. I am going to spend a little time fighting with my tech to see if I can pull this out of the network and get this PowerPoint presented. And I'm sure I can. I just got to figure out why I saved it this way. And that way we'll be able to share it with everyone. And Dan, just once again, to make sure I'm on point, do I have your permission to share the contents of the email as I presented it tonight?
Yes, well, certainly, I sent that to your city address, so it's basically a public document. So, and
Okay.
the email address is public also because it's our organizational email. But
Okay.
but however you want to share it, it's fine.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, all of my partners, for coming in and supporting us. I know you have a specific role and sometimes you don't speak as much, but please, you could always email or, we can sit down and have coffee or conversation. Thank you, community members. For those of you who are watching this as it's being streamed or watching it later, please join in and bring your questions and concerns, because as you see, we need the community and you will help us build that critical community mass to make sure this is a public effort. Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Take care. Thank you, Claudia.